Hello YouTube, and welcome to Superpower Broadcasting. My name is Kevin, and in this video I'm going to be discussing and addressing the issue as to whether the Western Alliance will have to do, in essence, a domino chain of endless wars, so to speak, as the meme goes, in order to secure a peace and democratic world for posterity. Now, it is clearly a popular talking point out there espoused by the isolationists, the anti-interventionists of all sorts, that, the hawks, they are simply idealists that if they were to see their vision through, billions would die, and the wars would never end, and the West would have to invade everyone. And I am here to tell you that this is bunk, and this is junk, and this talking point is absurd, and I shall explain why in this video. War is very costly. War is unfortunate. War is something that must be minimized and avoided where possible. The cost of war varies, however, according to how it is prosecuted or procrastinated with respect to. Now, there will be a great war in this century if we continue upon the current path. And if we continue upon this course of cringe and isolationism that our leaders from Washington to Ottawa to London to Paris have chosen for our civilization, if we ignore our enemies, we ignore them at our peril. It is not something that wishful thinking will ultimately prevent. It is not something that we can just simply say, if we don't want war, and if we stay to ourselves and do not engage the rest of the world, that war will not happen. No, this is a bunk talking point. This is a falsehood. This is ultimately a dangerously flawed understanding of international relations. Because our world is anarchic, and an anarchic world demands a hegemon. It requires a hegemon. If we refuse to act in the capacity as a hegemon, in a hegemonic capacity, we forfeit that status to our enemies. Now, there are only really a few candidates who can qualify for hegemon status in the world at present. Those are, of course, fascist Russia, communist China, or a future alliance of, the BRICS types working together and whatnot. But for all intents and purposes, the world would either be dominated by a hegemonic communist China or a hegemonic fascist Russia. And now you may say, of course, well, Kevin, you're being hyperbolic. The world won't be. Even if America goes full isolationist, America's hemisphere of the Americas will still be safe from the specter of communist China or fascist Russia's dominance. And while that may make sense given the historical context of the Monroe Doctrine, and America's immediate concern to uphold the security and preserve American hegemony over Latin America, Central America, Canada, etc. What we miss here is the present context of how far this isolationism has gone. So there are Russian forces in Venezuela right now. They have bombers that occasionally visit Venezuelan bases. You can watch these videos on Russia Today. They openly brag that they have military forces stationed in Venezuela. It is not a secret The Cuban Missile Crisis was very, very bad. It was a scary time, right? But you didn't see the Soviets bragging about it on TV that they were putting nukes in Cuba. No, they did that in secret. They did that. They tried to hide them. They had camouflage coverings over the facilities at which they were setting up their short and intermediate range ballistic missile launchers on the island of Cuba. And the intent was so that the Americans, with the CIA and the U-2 spy planes and whatnot, would not be able to identify these launch sites until it was too late. Now, they probably would have bragged about it after those sites came online, but the point was that as they were in the process of establishing a foothold in Cuba, they were not bragging about it. They weren't putting that on Russia Today. They weren't having their memes and stuff spread about how, oh, the Soviets, they deserve to be in Cuba because America's the bad guys. No, they were trying to keep that top secret. Whereas now they're open about it. They put troops in Venezuela. They put aircraft in Venezuela. There are Iranian forces in Venezuela. There are Chinese forces that have conducted cursory operations in Venezuela. They've done financing. They've done all kinds of deals with them and whatnot. That is something that back in the 1950s that would have provoked the ire of America so much that it would have risked a global thermonuclear war. Whereas now, it's all cool because Russia, they're led by a strong leader, as Donald Trump would say, the all-taker-in-chief, Donald Trump. No, this is unacceptable that they are in our backyard and we're doing nothing about it. So when I talk about if we forfeit the hegemonic status, that our enemies will take over, no, that's not just Eurasia. Don't get me wrong, Russia has every intention of controlling all of Eurasia. Duginism 101 is take control of Eurasia, from Europe to Southeast Asia, from Africa to Siberia. That's their objective, of course. And in that spheres of influence theory, they see America, they see the West, they see the Americas in particular as a later stage goal. Their focus is on controlling Eurasia, with the idea being that, well, it's too hard to take the Americas because America still has this huge military power. So the real concern is get America to stay out of the rest of the world, and then they can have their huge military, but it won't matter because as long as Russia has Eurasia, then they're going to be happy for a little while, of course, until they build up a superior military force. Then they'll come for us in North America, absolutely. But that might be a couple centuries down the road. But the thing is, in all of this, they're already in our backyard. That in and of itself would be bad enough. But no, they do have their eyes on the Americas as well. It's not just about Eurasia. And Eurasia is a bridge too far. We cannot accept this. We cannot allow our enemies to take a foothold anywhere. Going back to Harry Truman the Base, he had his policy and doctrine of containment. The idea being that, yes, the Soviets have nukes. The Soviets have this huge 20 million man army. We can't by ourselves take over and do to them what we did to the Nazis because it would be too costly. But what we can do is prevent the spread of communism and then push to destroy communism by other means without risking a war. That was the idea behind containment. We have forgotten that doctrine. We have abandoned that doctrine. Because though Russia is no longer communist, they are fascist now, they are still our enemy. They still view us as their enemy. They never stopped viewing America and the West as the problem. They never stopped viewing NATO as evil. We simply stopped caring about them seeing us as evil and got into wishful thinking that, we can be friends with Russia, as some on the right would say, and a lot on the left these days too. Some of the right-wingers would say, they're white, we're white, so we can be brothers as the master race. Master race, as they would say, right? A lot of the people on the left, they see Putin as some anti-imperialist champion of solidarity with the workers or whatever, which is hilarious, but, that's their fifth columnary at work, of course. And of course, the Kremlin sees them as useful idiots, as Yuri Bezmenov rightly pointed out. Yeah, the KGB views these people as idiots. They don't see them as allies that they should work and go out of their way to help. No, they see them as dumb. They see them as scum. They see them as simply a means by which the Russian state can propagate and promote its own prestige in the world. They view them as tools, and they are absolutely tools. The thing with all of this is that with respect to fascist Russia, communist China, that's what they would do. That's what they are doing as we forfeit the hegemonic status. But in all of this, of course, to get back to my original line of reasoning, well, the isolationists would say, well, if you want to change that, if you want to liberate the world, you're going to have to fight 100, 200 wars, endless wars with all these countries. And I am here as an unabashedly proud hawk to say, I am not opposed to war in circumstances where it is necessary, but war across the world is not necessary, and I shall explain why. That idea of the domino effect, that is a bunk talking point, that or the domino chain or whatever, that in order to bring about the fall of all the tin pot despots of the world, you basically would have to do one war after another, and the thing is, the domino analogy is not necessarily that good here. I know I've seen it referred to that way by isolationists and whatnot, but the idea isn't so much of a domino chain as it is more just stepping stones in a pond or whatever, that you have to go one after another. And I'm here to say, well, no, it is more along the lines of an organic way of going about these things, because there is a fact in international relations that credibility and the wherewithal to ultimately issue an ultimatum and follow through upon it, that is an emergent system. That is greater than the sum of its parts. That has effects that reach around the world. That in and of itself is worth more in cases than single wars are. And so I believe that there are a couple of threats in the world, and it is clear to me that there are a couple of threats in the world against whom war is absolutely necessary. There is no way to avert it. They have no intention whatsoever of coming to the negotiation table in good faith. And those two regimes are North Korea and Iran. The dictators of those countries, they cannot be brought to the negotiation table in good faith. If you bring them to negotiations, they take it for what it's worth. They lie. They get concessions, and they do not meet us. They do not offer any reciprocation. North Korea is worse than Iran, but Iran has nuclear ambitions as well. North Korea is the only solution with respect to North Korea's war. Now, in order to bring about the liberation of the world, what has to happen here is that you don't have to go to war with every country that has an oppressive government. That's not what has to happen. And in some cases, you can't do it, pragmatically speaking. With Russia, with fascist Russia, America would win. NATO would win a war against fascist Russia, but it would be too costly to justify, especially because there are other means of bringing about the downfall of fascist Russia. I explain it in my videos on oil prices, where all we have to do to destroy fascist Russia is just drill as much oil as possible and sell it for as cheap as possible. They get almost all their government revenue from oil. So if oil is no longer something they can make money from, the people will come for Putin's head on a platter and demand their pension, and he won't be able to come up with the money, and they will murder him just as they did Gaddafi. They will do the work for us. We do not need to go to war with them. with fascist, or I should say with communist China. All that we have to do, their Achilles heel is the trade. All that we have to do is simply move our factories over to India. We'll make a profit in the long run, and we have to blockade them. We have to say, as the West, as the EU, Canada, and the United States, we will not buy one more dollar's worth of products from you until the Communist Party has fallen. And they will go bankrupt so soon, and the people will come for Shizad on a silver platter, and they will do to him what they did to Gaddafi, and they will say, we need jobs, we're starving, and the Communist Party will have no way of alleviating it, and they will collapse. So war is not necessary against Communist China. But with North Korea does not have that Achilles heel of being interconnected. They are to some extent dependent on China for financial assistance, but they were also at one time dependent on fascist Russia for communists, or for assistance. They were dependent upon the USSR back when that was around. And then the USSR collapsed and they starved. 3 million North Koreans starved. The economy completely collapsed. Everything in North Korea collapsed because they were not an ally of communist China. They were an ally of Moscow, and Moscow was no longer able to bankroll them. And it took them a long time to come around to saying, okay, we're going to have to work with communist China now, because they were their enemy during the Cold War. If a war broke out between the Soviet Union and communist China, North Korea was sending troops into communist China. They were on the side of Moscow, right? They were on the side of Stalin and Khrushchev and all those guys. They weren't on the side of Mao. And that whole thing, that whole brotherhood between the North Korean regime and Mao's regime, that ended shortly after the Sino-Soviet split, right? They were a Soviet puppet state. They were a Soviet satellite. And when the Soviets collapsed and could not give them food, they starved. And what did the regime do? What did the leadership do? What did Kim Jong-il do? He drank champagne. He bought his Mercedes. He bought his yachts and continued to live the life. He did not care that 10%, 15% of his country died in 3 years. It did not matter. In fact, he viewed it as a victory, because the people who starved to death were the people that the regime viewed as the most hostile, the least loyal to Pyongyang. So for them to starve to death, it was simply culling the herd. And Kim Jong-il said, we have 3 million fewer enemies to worry about after they died, because he knew that they were the most likely ones that would stoke a revolution against Pyongyang if it were to happen. And it was a way of economically purging the enemies of the state without having to waste money on bullets, as Kim Jong-il saw it. You know, Stalin, he spent a lot of money on bullets executing political prisoners. Kim Jong-il, he didn't have to spend that money because the starvation did it for him. And that is a lesson to be learned about North Korea. They will not cave. We could apply all the pressure in the world. Even if the sanctions worked 100%, the last person to feel the effects of the sanctions is the only person that matters in the country. It is Kim Jong-il. Or it is Kim Jong-un currently. He's the last person that they will affect. And as long as it doesn't affect him, he does not care. The other 24 million, 25 million North Koreans could starve to death. And as long as him and his cadre are still around, it's A-okay, because the entire country exists to affirm and uphold the prestige of the dear leader. They will, as he said, they'll eat grass, they'll starve to death, they'll do whatever it takes to build up their nuclear arsenal. And he is correct about that. He is not lying to us. His father was not lying to us. His father was credible. His father said, yeah, you know what? These are rough times. This is the arduous march, as he called it. The arduous march. What a euphemism. 3 million died of starvation in a few years in short order. And he uses the communist language to describe it as a victory of the working class or whatever. What a joke. What an absolute disgrace, right? But it gives you the idea that these people mean business. Our enemies mean business. Kim Jong-un, he means business. When he says that 10 million will starve in order to secure North Korea. He's not lying about that. He would starve them. He would sooner allow his entire country to die of starvation than he would come to the negotiation table in good faith. There is no diplomatic solution to North Korea. John Bolton, the based, has been on the record saying this for many years, and what have we done? We have ignored him. We have ignored him as a civilization. It is pathetic. It is absolutely pathetic because this is obvious to anyone who's studied North Korea. You don't even need to study North Korea to the extent that I have to understand that the Kim dynasty does not care about the North Korean people. And it's not even to the extent that, oh, well, they care about them because they need their tax money or whatever. No, they really don't. All that matters is the personal prestige of the dear leader. If 10 million North Koreans died, they would still have enough tax money from the other 15 million that Kim could still maintain his luxury lifestyle. 10 million North Koreans could die and it wouldn't matter because all that matters is get those nukes, reach that magic number, whatever it is. Is it 1,326 nukes? Is it 1,482 nukes? Is it 1,595 nukes? Whatever their number is, when they know that once they reach that critical mass, that they can do whatever, they can invade South Korea, and America will not intervene because America will not lose Chicago and New York and LA and Seattle 10 times over in a nuclear barrage in order to save Seoul. That is their objective. Their sole objective with the nukes is to have a deterrent against America. It is not to nuke America. It is to have a deterrent so that they can take South Korea. They have to go. There is no peaceful solution. There's no diplomatic solution. There's no economic solution. There's no sanction solution. There's no social solution. There's nothing. The only solution to the Kim dynasty is tactical nuclear warheads and conventional ordnance against them. That is the only thing that will avert a calamitous situation in which the entire peninsula is brought under communist tyranny. And if we as the West do it and we follow through on it and we go in there and we take out the Kim dynasty and we show that we mean business, and then in a short order of time, we follow it up with nuclear strikes against Iran and we go in and we liberate the Iranian people and destroy their regime. And within the span of a couple years, North Korea and Iran's regimes have both been nuked and their people liberated and turned into American allies with American bases and American soldiers stationed there. I can tell you that if the West does those two things in short order, boom, boom, like 1, 2, not, oh, we take out North Korea and then 20 years later we take out Iran. No, I'm talking, we do North Korea, boom, gone. And then we do Iran, boom, gone. I can tell you the rest of the tin pot despots out there, well, I despise them. Bashar the Butcher, the despot of Saudi Arabia, Vladimir Putin, Vlad the Thug, Erdogan the Evil, all of these people, Winnie the Pooh over in China, communist China, all these people, all these tin pot despots, they will see what just happened and they will know that they are next if they do not agree to come to the table in good faith. And they will fall to their knees and they will say to America, what must we do to secure and to avoid the ire of your wrath? What must we do to avoid the fate of our comrades in Pyongyang and Tehran? What must we do? And America will say, you have to reform. There's no way about it. Either reform or die. Those are your two choices. Because right now, why do they not reform? Because you always get a lot more money as a leader if your country reforms. I mean, you can look at communist China, for example. They did reform back in the 70s, 80s, late 70s after Mao died. They did reform. Deng Xiaoping reformed. They were still communists. They were still a dictatorship. But they did reform economically, and they profited immensely off of it. So you would say, why wouldn't all these other regimes learn from that and follow suit with China and say, well, we're not going to become like America, but we're going to at least relax on some things and we'll make a ton of money because of it. Well, the reason why they don't is because the money doesn't matter to them. Money matters to the leaders, don't get me wrong. That's all that they care about is the swag. It's the Swiss bank accounts. It's the swag yachts. It's the champagne, all that good stuff. But they already have that. Whether they have $10 billion now or if they reformed and had $100 billion, it doesn't matter. Because if they reform, there's a chance that that leads to a revolution. Because once you go from being a stable, solid, authoritarian dictatorship to being a reformed dictatorship, that is a dangerous process. And if you don't do it 100% right, you'll see an Arab Spring type situation show up. And then it's the death of you. And then you don't have $10 billion anymore. You're 6 feet under as a rotting corpse in the ground. So they can't do that. They can't risk it. Bashar couldn't risk it. Kim can't risk it. All these dictators, they can't risk it. China threaded a very tight needle there, and they succeeded in it, where they were able to benefit from the prosperity of capitalism while maintaining a communist dictatorship. It was smart on their part. North Korea can't do that. They can't do that because there was, when that happened, a risk that the Communist Party in China would be overthrown. Now, they weren't, but was there a 10% chance? Was there a 15% chance? There could have been a 60% chance of them being overthrown at some point. And they did have the Tiananmen Square situation. They did crack down on that, and they did take draconian means to stifle the uprising of the people. But they did continue the economic reform. North Korea can't do that because they'll say, well, why would we risk it? The dear leader already has the swag yacht and the Benz and everything else. If he has 100 more, that's great, but we're not going to take a chance of a 10% chance of him dying so that we can get richer. They're not going to do that. If North Korea reformed economically like China did, they would still have their dictatorship, but they would be a lot richer. They would be a lot richer. Kim would be a lot richer, but it doesn't matter, because if that's you and you're the dictator of the country and you have absolute power, are you going to take a 10% chance that you get executed so that you can double your money, triple your money? No, because he's already got $15 billion as a net worth. And he's not that greedy to do it. He's more greedy for power than he is for money at this point, because he already has all the money in the world. So that's not an incentive to motivate these people, because they know that there's a chance that they would be executed in a revolution. Now, if we do what I just laid out, and we take out North Korea and Iran, those other regimes, their calculation all of a sudden changes. Where before the calculation was, oh, if we reform, there's a chance of us dying, so let's not reform, and let's keep the status quo. Whereas now, once they see that the West, NATO, America means business, now they say, well, if we reform, there's a chance that the people rise up and kill us. But if we don't reform, there's a 100% chance that America comes over and kills us. So now, all of a sudden, the tables have turned, and now it's in their incentive to reform. Because, yes, there's still a chance that the people will kill them in the process once they get a taste of freedom and rise up and go Arab Spring style. But it's already been clear that there's a 100% chance that America will come for them next if they don't reform. And so they will have to reform. They will have to reform because there's a lower chance of death for themselves by doing it. And once that happens, that's the real domino effect. That's the real domino effect in all of this, is that they will fall one by one on their knees to say, what must we do to secure our mortal existence and safeguard our regime? What must we do? And America will say, well, you have to reform. You have to move in a direction towards democracy. That's what you have to do. Otherwise, the penalty is death. And they will get the message loud and clear. And they will fall to the whim of our will. And we will create a liberal order worldwide with little effort. Now, the wars in Iran and North Korea will be brutal, but those wars are inevitable, because those wars happen whether we wait for North Korea to invade South Korea or we go in and take them out before they do it. War with North Korea is inevitable. Same with Iran. Either we wait until they get nukes and they attack Israel and U.S. bases in the region, or we take them out. Those are the two options. So it's not like there's an option between war and peace. The only choices are war now and have X amount of people die, or war later and have 10X amount of people die. Well, I'm interested in minimizing suffering. I'm interested in minimizing casualties. I'm interested in an American-centered world. I'm not interested in a communist or fascist-centered world. So I want America to become the hegemon of the world again, 100%, 100%, because those are your only three choices. Now you may say, well, America's not a perfect country. And I would agree with you. But it is obvious that communist China and fascist Russia are less perfect than America is. It's not even close. And if this is followed through, there will not be a great war in this century. There will be a great peace in this century. There will be a great prosperity in this century. But if we do not ultimately secure our credibility in the world, and make sure that our enemies know that we mean business, there will be a great war in this century, and many tens of millions of people will die. And yes, sure, the isolationists, the Jimmy Dores, the Neckbeard Jims, the Kremlin Kyles, the Dave Rubins of the world will say, oh, you guys, you're the neocons. You got 4 million people killed in the war with North Korea. You're uncredible. Meanwhile, of course, if we waited, 40 million people die when they go into South Korea and attack Japan and everything. So yeah, I mean, it's the same with the Iraq war. They say, oh, you got 1 million people killed. 1 million people didn't die in that. That's a meme that needs to be debunked, which I will. But 2, Saddam killed like 1.5 million people anyway over the course of his regime. So if we didn't take him out, guess what? He would have killed another 1.5 million people if he had another 30 years in power. So no matter what, more people would have died by not doing the Iraq war. Oh, but the neocons get blamed because, oh, casualties happened. And everybody loses sight of how many casualties were averted by not letting Saddam do another war for land and oil, which he had already proven his credibility. He proved he meant business. He had invaded Kuwait. He had invaded Iran. It is not outside the bounds of reason to assume or to speculate that he would have invaded Saudi Arabia at some point, that he would have invaded Israel, that he would have done something to cause even more chaos and kill even more people. He was a menace. Bush took out the menace. Yes, did people die killing the menace? Absolutely. More people would have died had the menace been allowed to continue his rogue statery. And in all of this, we must bear in mind that if we follow through with that, the ultimate perpetual peace that can emerge, once these other leaders realize, the Tim Hot despots realize that they have to reform, it will be great. Because even the most brutal regimes will start moving in the path of democracy. And we may never have to fight a serious war again after those two, Iran and North Korea, are taken out. Because China will fall in line. Fascist Russia will fall in line. Bashar the Butcher, if his dynasty is still around, they will fall in line. They will all fall to their knees and they will submit to our will. And we will establish a liberal order in the world in which, well, human rights may take some time before they are universally regarded. We will move in a direction towards universal human dignity. And this is the only way. And we will prevent suffering. And we will create the most abundant prosperity in human history. So thank you for watching, my friends.